Hello, welcome to my review of Mukuge by Mamiko Suzuki. This is her second solo album, and she is one member of the rap duo Chelmiko. So as you can probably tell, I'm somewhat of a fan of Mamiko Suzuki. She's this one, by the way. And on this one, she's this one. Just a heads up. So, like I said, we are reviewing her new album, which came out in June. This album is amazing. Mamiko Suzuki is probably my favorite Japanese vocalist right this second. And I say vocalist because she is probably my favorite singer and rapper, just because she excels at those two skills every chance she gets. So it's been 3 years since her first album that was titled MS, which are the initials of her name, obviously. That album has a very similar sound to this new one. However, it relied more on electronics and was more along the lines of chill hop, more so than this one. I would maybe say this is still chill hop, but it's got much more lush and acoustic instrumentals that really give it life. I would also like to note that I located this interview with the Japanese publication called Real Sound that had released for this album. So I will be referring to that interview every so often. So when I mention an interview, it will be that interview, and I will have it linked in the description as well if you would like to read it. So Chelmiko's work is more along the lines of pop and rap and J-pop and rock. That's kind of what I expected going into this album, especially with Mamiko's first solo album as well. However, this LP features much more bossa nova and jazz sounds. And she has somewhat flirted with this in the past. Chelmiko came out with an EP last year called I Want to Dance With You, period. And on there is a song called Flash. And Flash is this almost like cabaret-inspired sounding rap song that is just very cute, very beautiful, great instrumentation. And I feel like that was definitely a sign of things to come with this album. So the name of this album is Mukuge. And in looking that up, Mukuge is the Japanese word for the Rose of Sharon, which is the flower on a hibiscus plant. And I think it's pronounced hibiscus. It might be something else. I don't know anything about plants. I only know things about music and literally nothing else. But I think hibiscus is right. So as I mentioned, Chelmiko's musical stylings are that of like hip hop, electronic, such as like house music and drum and bass and rock and reggae and dub and Latin pop. These genres are typically very loud and very, very lively. However, this album opts for a more stripped back production, style, and vocal delivery. Genres I would attribute to this album would be bossa nova, cabaret, jazz, soft rock, bedroom pop, and then as well as some like Latin and Brazilian jazz influences as well, sort of like you would see on an album by the band Lamp. So let's start this off by talking about the song Kimochi. Now, Kimochi means feelings, among other things, but let's just keep it to the word feelings. So it's a very stripped back song with minimal production that's primarily being carried by a 4-chord guitar melody, and has this like pluckiness of the guitar that almost makes it harp-esque, which is really cool, and it kind of gives off this like heavenly sort of vibe for that reason. The first song on the album is called Utsutsu, and it features these flutes with piano, live drums, and this very tinny sounding percussion kind of in the background that just sort of fills up all of the atmosphere around you as you're listening to this song. Another song on the album is called Kara Kara, and it has this continued use of piano, soft percussion, and wind instruments, and it really demonstrates how Mamiko is able to transition from these very frantic Chelmiko rap stylings into this more subdued sort of energy at the drop of a dime. She's really able to kind of hone in on this one specific sound here for her voice and for her rapping. I find that not everyone can transition from like very aggressive hard rap into something more like this, where it's very just laid back and you're almost letting the instrumental lead what you're saying. So that's a really cool aspect of that song, I think. I just find that the general sound of the album just kind of transports me to this garden environment where there's all this like flora and fauna and insects just all kind of around me, and you're just kind of taking it all in like all at once. And there's never been an album that really makes me feel this very distinct way. So hats off to the producer Ryo Takahashi for that. He really works some magic on this album. For instance, there's this one song called May Blues, and it starts off as this sort of sing-song acoustic guitar number that swells up, and it adds in some electronic production, and it ends in this like very colorful explosion of sound and rapping from Mamiko. Mamiko actually explained that this song was inspired by the recent movie by Wim Wenders called Perfect Days, and I also find that this song captures very similar themes and expressions in that movie as well. That movie, which you should watch for sure if you haven't already, it's really centered on kind of melancholy and malaise about that as it pertains to one's life. But there's also this sense of kind of happy contentment that is present in the movie as well, and is also definitely present in this song. Now, one song I'll be coming back to for sure in this video is the song Secret Garden. It features this amazing soundscape and is filled with this barrage of very thin clapping and tapping, and it almost creates this sound of like birds or insects just kind of making noise all around you. Another highlight on the album is a song called In a Bubble with You, and it features more fantastic production and has a lot of liveliness, which Mamiko easily raps over. Now, Ryo Takahashi has a production credit on every song on this album except for one, and that is the song called Night Out Drinking. Now, when this album was announced, I chose not to like hear any of the singles or try to look for the track listing. I just wanted it to be as organic as possible when I started listening to the album for the first time. And so I did. So I woke up on a Wednesday and this album had just come out. I'm not looking at the track list, and then it gets to Night Out Drinking, and there's this very familiar guitar that's playing, and I was like, oh, where do I know this from? This song is the only song on the album that has a stated feature, and that stated feature is May Simonis. And May Simonis is an American. She is a guitarist and singer, and her kind of genre realms are bossa nova and kind of grunge and math rock and just kind of jazzy Midwest emo, that whole sort of hemisphere. When her vocals came in on this song, I was like, oh my god, it's my girl. Oh my god. So May Simonis came out with this fantastic EP earlier this year called Kabuto Mushi, and it is fantastic. And it's probably one of my favorite projects from this year, just across all of the music industry. So I was extremely happy to have her appear as this like almost surprise feature for me, and it just blew me away. I think in particular, this is one of May's best instrumentals of the entire year that she's released. And I am absolutely in love with how Mamiko and May just harmonize their voices so perfectly and so well. And I would love for them to make more collab music. I don't know. Hopefully they do. I read that this one only came about because they were touring together with May as an opener for Mamiko. So I'd love for them to have the opportunity to do something like this again, but that's kind of iffy. I think this song is just so blissful and divine and just real with its lyrics. It's kind of written as like two friends just kind of at a bar together talking about shit over drinks. That's a good enough premise for me, and I think it's a really cool one. And yeah, lovely song. Lovely song. So I mentioned a few things there. I mentioned Mamiko's ability to sing, and I mentioned her kind of transition into more bossa nova music, which May is very much into at the moment. I find that Mamiko made a really smart choice when she transitioned from hip hop more into bossa nova. With bossa nova, she really had to find out how she can sing and also talk/rap in time with the bossa nova beat and rhythm, and she nailed it. She knew exactly what the assignment was, and she nailed it. And I would love more work from her in this genre. I think she is just so well suited and so skilled for this type of work. Going back to the song Secret Garden, the second half of the song features this really energetic rap verse as all of the different instrumentation starts to kind of coalesce. And I find that she kind of revives her Chilmiko energy on this song. The very last song is called EO, and EO also has more of that Chilmiko energy, though not my favorite song on the album, which I'll kind of talk about in a little bit here. So let's talk about Mamiko's lyricism on this album. The lyrics in general are just very light and fluffy introspections on love and life. That first song, Utsutsu, luckily came with this pre-translation in English on the music video on YouTube. So let me read one excerpt from that. It's just very nice. It goes, "Cheek to cheek, get it closer. Make trouble for me when the sun goes down. Let's go fool around tonight. That's right, you and me, we're gonna be good. Maybe we're both up to something. Maybe we're in this together." It's cute, right? Similarly, the song In a Bubble with You has this very cutesy, sort of like flirty sort of attitude for it. So it goes, "Even if the world ends tomorrow, let's be together forever. Your favorite movies and music, I'll watch and listen to them over and over. I want to give you all of what you want. Morning, noon, or night, I'll send you sweet glances and sweet words." Yeah, it's just really nice, and we need more nice albums, I feel like. Not everything has to be like super sad. Some things are allowed to be nice, I like to think. So I've got one sort of bone to pick with this album, and that is the tracklist sequencing, which is something that's fairly important to how I enjoy albums. So this album actually has pretty good sequencing for the most part, with one exception, and that is the final song, EO, which I mentioned earlier. I find that it's a pretty ineffective closing song, and the preceding one, which I mentioned earlier, called Kimochi, is just so much more well suited to be the closing song of the album, so it's strange that it isn't. Kimochi has this sort of sunsetting sort of sound to it that I think is just such a more natural fit than this song. And so I was really upset because I just did not like this as the final song. So I found that interview, and I found my answer in that interview. So God bless the interviewer, because he actually straight up asked Mamiko, why was this the final song? So maybe he was just as confused as I was. So he asked, and her response was, quote, "I was listening to Little Sims at the time, so I told Ryo I want to rap a little. She laughs. It was the same with MS. But when I'm making an album, I start to want to rap around the middle. As you said, it's a completely different vibe from the previous albums, and I wondered, should I add this too? But I thought, no, this is me. So I decided to put it at the end as a kind of bonus track." And then the interviewer asks, "What do you mean by this is me?" And then she responds, "Mamiko Suzuki wants to be free." She laughs. "I don't want to be bound by rules like, just because it's an acoustic album with bossa nova doesn't mean I can't put in rap." And yeah, I think that's super fair. It's her album. She's directing it. She's curating it. She's free to put whatever she wants on the album wherever she wants. That actually kind of cleared up that frustration I had. I just wish that it was marked in some way that it is the bonus track, because it's kind of a misnomer for that to be your last song, to be your last word, to be your definitive last statement on the album, and have it be not quite a dud, but just not fit well there at all. The explanation makes sense. It's just weird. So let's wrap it up. This is probably the prettiest sounding album I've heard all year. Maybe a close second is Ravina's Where the Butterflies Go in the Rain, but it's not quite. So this album released in June of this year, but man, am I looking forward to listening to it in spring of next year. It is going to be such a vibe. I can't wait. And I think here on this album, Mamiko is just so incredibly versatile. It's just honestly amazing. And I don't care if she's singing or rapping on a song. I want to hear everything she's able to put out. As I've said, the production, very nice, very smooth, suits her perfectly. And Mamiko just sounds so fantastic over all of these various kinds of instrumentals that she was presented with. Everything's pretty fantastic, but there is one link, and that is the song Kiyoi Sabo. I didn't mention it in this review just because I don't really have anything to say about it other than I think it's a miss. In the interview, Mamiko actually talks about this song, and she said it's named after a cafe near where she was recording that would let her smoke. And that's pretty much it. So like, yay, I'm like happy for you. That's a sentimental kind of thing, but just not really my vibe. So aside from that song, I just know that there are so many tracks on this album that just have a lot of replayability for me, and thereby have a lot of longevity, and thereby mean that I'm going to be listening to some of these songs for years and years and years and years, and they're going to be stuck in my head for years and years and years and years. And so that equates to a very high score, in my opinion. So with that said, I would definitely rate this album an 8.5 out of 10. I think it could have gotten to a 9 if EO was better advertised as a bonus track So for my first like 10 listens, I was just under the assumption that, wow, this track list really kind of falls apart towards the end without any kind of like marker or note or announcement. I'm sure a lot of other people are feeling this way too. If Kiyoi Sabo was fixed up or wasn't there, I'd probably rate this album a little higher too, but that's not up to me. But yeah, 8.5 out of 10. I love a lot of these songs. I think they're fantastic. I think the production's fantastic. I think everyone she got involved is fantastic. I love the album cover. It's so cool, and I think it just looks exactly like how the album sounds. So anyway, I would love for Mamiko to continue exploring more of this kind of jazzy side of her, but that's kind of up in the air. We don't know what the future holds, but hopefully she does. With that said, thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I think you should listen to the album. I think you should listen to Chelmiko as well. They're fantastic. And yeah, thank you for your time. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one. So have a good rest of your day.